Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to present the key findings and implications that we see for broadband service providers from our recent analysis of broadband usage data. This is for the first quarter of 2020. I'm Larry Siegel, and I'll be serving as your host on today's webinar. I'm going to introduce our agenda, talk a bit about our role in developing this groundbreaking report, and then I'll turn it over to our CEO and founder, Mark Trudeau, who will take us on a deep dive into the key findings and their implications for broadband operators, especially during this unusual time of the COVID-19 pandemic. As we go through our key findings, if you have any questions, please submit your questions within the webinar field on your Zoom interactive screen, and if we have time, we'll address your questions. So let's get started. Here's what we're going to go over today. We're going to do a quick overview of what the OpenVault Broadband Industry Report is and how it's developed. I'm going to give you an executive summary of findings so you know what it is we're going to be talking about. And then we're going to get into the specifics, broadband data usage growth. We're going to talk about power users and their impact for operators. We're going to talk about provision broadband speeds, how that is changing. We're going to talk about European data usage, how that compares to North America. And then we're going to get into the heart of it, the COVID-19 pandemic impact, some of the astounding things that we saw and how it's going to impact operators today and possibly moving forward. Then a little bit about us and our actionable solutions. And then lastly, we'll talk about your questions and get to some of those answers. OpenVault is a 10-year-old company specializing in proprietary solutions for broadband operators. We provide actionable insight and tools based on usage analytics. We've provided these solutions for over 150 operators in North and South America and Europe during our 10 years in business. We've helped operators improve their annual revenue by hundreds of millions of dollars, and we do so for more operators than any other broadband solutions vendor in the world. We're an award-winning solutions provider, as we've mentioned, and our solutions drive better network management, save time and costs, increased ARPU, and higher customer satisfaction. And later on in the presentation, we'll give you a little glimpse into how we do that. Our tools gather broadband usage data generated by our broadband provider customers in North and South America and Europe. And once within our platform, we create a holistic pool of data across millions of subscriber data usage records, into which we execute a series of powerful analytic queries ranging from overall usage, tiered usage, plan migrations, and geographic characteristics. These then yield insights which have implications for broadband providers. And then we share those insights with our quarterly OpenVault Broadband Industry Report Advisories, or OVBI. Now we'd like to jump into the specifics of this, and to do so, we bring on Mark Trudeau, our founder and CEO.
Great, thanks, Larry. And before we actually get into the data, we'd just like to say I hope everyone is remaining safe and healthy during this time. This pandemic has actually hit very close to home to those of us here at OpenVault. We've had a few members of our family, unfortunately, contract this virus. Fortunately, they've come out the other side in good shape and feeling good. So we know as well as anybody the impacts of this thing. And again, thoughts and prayers to everyone out there listening on this call and your friends and family as well. So just to share with you a few of the high-level stats right out of the gate, data growth has really, every time we provide one of these updates, it's grown. We're now seeing unprecedented growth, and we're seeing 402.5 gigabytes per household now average usage, and that's up 47% over what we saw last year. And as you'll see, when we go through this, when we get to more of the impacts of the pandemic, we're continuing to see usage grow at astronomical levels. Additionally, power users have grown tremendously. We've changed our definition where we used to look at power users as 250 gigabyte customers. That's no longer the case. We now track subscribers using over a terabyte and oftentimes over 2 terabytes. But we view a power user as the terabyte user, and there's no other category that's grown as much as the terabyte plus user in this past year, up 138%. Since the first quarter of 2019. Another thing that we really look at, because there's a very strong correlation between provision speeds and usage growth. So one of the areas that we've been tracking of late is particularly at the gig speed level. What percentage of subscribers on the operators that we work with are provisioned for a gigabit speed? And again, that number has grown tremendously, even since the fourth quarter of 2019. Just here in the past quarter, we've seen tremendous growth for subscribers provisioned at that fast speed. And we'll discuss that in more detail here in the presentation. We also track, as Larry mentioned, European usage with our customers in Europe. Traditionally, Europe has actually shown a bit lower profile than we've seen in the North American markets, and we'll show you a comparison here in the presentation. But despite that, we are seeing very, very rapid growth in Europe, as we are, in fact, all over the world, and we'll share some of those statistics in more detail as well. Lastly, the impact of the pandemic is startling in terms of how usage is changing per household, in terms of when data is being consumed, how it's being consumed, upstream, downstream, et cetera. Tremendous changes in usage patterns, and we'll share what that means to operators in terms of how they now must deal with the growth on their networks. Clearly what the pandemic has caused are a ton of mitigation efforts that all seem to be really impacting the broadband space. And as people now are working from home, online classes for students become commonplace, et cetera, it's having a profound impact on these networks. And usage patterns are, in fact, shifting to different parts of the day and different types of usage, again, which we will address. Let's just start with the basics here and looking at average usage per household. So as you can see on the left, our weighted average usage here in the first quarter of 2020 ended up being 402.5 gigabytes, and that's compared to 273 a year ago. So tremendous growth observed year over year, as well as even since the fourth quarter, again, of 2019. We do like to look at those operators that have flat rate billing in place, in other words, unlimited usage, versus the usage profile of those operators that, in fact, have data quotas in place and what we call usage-based billing plans. And you can see here that there is a delta, and that has been the case and continues to be the case in terms of the fact that flat rate unlimited usage, the profile of those operator subscribers shows a higher usage level than those actually that have usage-based billing. Now, this is an interesting time to look at this, since I'm sure most people on the webinar here understand that many operators have actually relaxed their usage quotas during this COVID-19 period. And we have seen that has had an impact on usage growth, especially amongst those what I would call temporarily suspended UBB customers. And again, we have a little more detail on that as we go through the presentation. But again, starting with just the average average usage per household, we are seeing 402 versus 273 a year ago, which represents a 47% increase in usage. Normally, our year-over-year growth falls in that 30% range. So we're seeing just, the impacts of this have been tremendous. And again, it's continued to grow beyond even these levels, which I'll share in a bit. Now, again, when we look at the growth and we break down flat rate billing subscribers versus usage-based billing, we are seeing, in fact, that those usage-based billing operators are seeing more growth than the flat rate billing operators. And we attribute that to the fact that usage-based billing is now relaxed. In many cases, usage quotas have been relaxed, and those subscribers are no longer concerned with exceeding their data caps and getting hit with overage charges. And as a result, we've seen their usage grow at a faster rate than flat rate billing. Another area that we focus on is look at median growth, because it's not enough to just look at average growth. That could just be the power users dragging up the overall average, where when we look at median growth, it encompasses the entire subscriber base. And when we see usage growth for median, at the median level, growing at a faster rate than average usage growth, it tells us that the entire subscriber base is using more. It's not just the top users bringing up the average. And those numbers are depicted here, where we're seeing 60% higher median usage in the first quarter of this year than we did in the first quarter of 2019. Okay, let's shift gears to focus on power users for a bit. And we look at power users as those subscribers that are consuming over 1 terabyte of data in a given month. And that percentage has grown 138% since the first quarter of 19 to where now we're seeing over 10% of subscribers exceeding 1 terabyte of usage per month, which is a tremendous amount of usage. And there are many theories as to why this is happening, but of course, one is, the fact that there are more and more OTT options out there. Many subscribers continue to cut the cord, and ultimately, when they do that, every bit of content, every streaming video that they're consuming is now, every piece of video that they're consuming is now streaming, and it's taking up a big chunk of the broadband pipe. So they're therefore just consuming vast amounts of data. And as those habits continue to change, as more and more subscribers adopt those habits and change their own content consumption behavior, those numbers are only going to grow. So 10% usage, we got to this level faster than we expected, largely due to what's going on in the world right now. And we'll share with you here later in the presentation how this actually compares to what we predicted to occur in 2020. Now, taking it a step further and slicing up the power users into 3 categories, I mentioned we used to look at 250 gigabytes as our power user. Now we can see that whether you're a usage-based billing operator or whether you're flat rate billing, doesn't matter. You've got nearly 50% of your subscribers now using over 250 gigabytes. So we can no longer call that a power user. That is ultimately pretty much the median user at this point. Again, with the terabyte usage, you can see the percentage of subscribers exceeding that terabyte level, and then all the way to 2 terabytes. And this is where the usage-based billing pricing approach seems to curtail usage at the power level. You can see the flat rate billing subscribers are showing 1.4% of their subscribers using over 2 terabytes. The usage-based billing operators are only showing 1%. So 40% more subscribers are using over 2 terabytes if there's flat rate billing in place. Again, these numbers are something to keep an eye on as operators decide to either reintroduce their quotas, remain unlimited. We'll see what's happening with that once the worst of this pandemic passes. But it's interesting to look at this data because it does appear that the pricing schemes that operators use certainly have an impact on subscriber usage. Okay, so now we're going to shift to looking at the provision speeds that we're observing in the marketplace. And we break these speeds down into a number of different categories, from the very slow bandwidth speeds of less than 10 megabits per second up to the fastest speed being offered right now at a gig level. So starting with that gig level, we're seeing again that right now 3.75% of all subscribers now actually have a gig service. Many subscribers are upgrading to that service. Many subscribers are selecting that service when they just come online. They want the fastest speed to be able to support their usage behavior. Those numbers are up 97% since the first quarter of 2019. So tremendous growth in terms of the percentage of subscribers provisioned at that gig speed level. On the other side of the equation are those subscribers that have very slow speeds, and slow by today's standards, and that's less than 10 megabits per second. And what we're seeing is just a huge drop-off in the number of subscribers that fall into that category. And we can imagine why, as more and more subscribers, again, are cutting the cord. Many subscribers now who work from home, they need faster upstream speeds as well. Typically, there's roughly a 10-to-1 ratio that operators provide in an asymmetrical environment where it's maybe 10 megabits down speed and 1 up. That's not enough these days when you're talking about using video calling services like Zoom and Microsoft Teams, etc. Subscribers need faster speeds for this new normal, if you will. So we're seeing in our data the migration clearly away from the slow speeds and subscribers migrating and moving up to the faster speeds in the bigger pipes. In fact, so much so that over 80% of subscribers are now provisioned at faster than 50 megabits per second. So in our previous OVBI report, we highlighted the fact that there's a very strong correlation between provision speed growth and average usage per household. And so essentially, as subscribers on average move up to faster speeds, we expect higher usage levels to follow. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One reason is, in fact, things like Netflix's adaptive bitrate service, where the faster speeds offered, the higher quality video that they're going to serve up, which chews up more data. So these are things that the operator isn't necessarily changing anything that they're doing. They're simply providing a faster speed to the consumer, and it happens to chew up more data as a result due to things like adaptive bitrate, due to the fact that now they can simultaneously stream many videos at once with the faster speeds. So faster speeds is a key to continue to track, because as we see those increases, we're going to see a continued increase in usage per household. Now we'll look at how Europe compares to North America. I mentioned up front that traditionally the European subscribers have a lower usage profile than North American subscribers. And that's due, again, in many ways to the fact that North American markets have been a bit ahead of the game in terms of upgrading their networks to be able to offer gig services in those faster speeds, where in Europe, we typically haven't seen as many of those network upgrades from the MSO marketplace to provide those faster speeds. So it holds true what I was saying before, that in fact usage because of that is down as compared to the North American market. So we see a 402 gigabyte average in North America, with just under 250 actually average in Europe, although that is up 41% from what we saw in the first quarter of 2019. But in North America, we're seeing 1.63 times the usage level than we are in Europe. When we look at median, same trend holds true, but where in fact the North American market has a 1.43 times higher median usage level than does Europe. But Europe, again, when it comes to median usage, is growing. And as we noticed in North America, it's growing at a faster rate than the average usage. So it's their entire customer base in Europe using more for all the same reasons that we talked about here in North America. More OTT, more cord cutting, et cetera, et cetera. Now we're going to talk about the impacts that we've observed looking at the data both all the way back to January in the first quarter, and then comparing it to March, because traditionally January and March have had very, very similar usage profiles. Over the 10 years that we've been doing this, we've seen that consistently play out, where March usage tends to be very similar to January. So we're going to share some analysis with you showing how usage has actually changed throughout the day and how it compares actually to back in January and some weeks here leading up to the end of the first quarter. All right, so as mentioned, what we're looking at here is a picture of usage every hour of the day, gigabytes per hour, and we're looking at January, which is the very bottom line, the dark line that you see, and then we're comparing what usage per hour looks like each week in the month of March. And you can see that third week of March, the week of March 23rd, showed the highest usage level. And if everyone, I'm sure, recalls, that's when all the stay-at-home orders started coming down, all the mitigation efforts took hold. That's where we really observed tremendous usage. Now, if you look deeper, most of that usage growth occurred, again, maybe not surprisingly, but during the hours of 9 and 5. So as more and more students and people worked from home, we saw usage during the day just explode to levels of roughly 50% in growth during the 9 to 5 hours. Now, we didn't necessarily expect the usage to also grow during peak time, but in fact, that is what happened. And as you can see by this chart, usage grew really every hour of the day, mostly during the 9 to 5 hours, but operators designed their networks to support peak time. So they've also had to deal with that peak curve peaking even at higher levels than they saw back in January. And on average, we saw peak usage grow about 20%, which means operators have been faced with having to support at least 20% higher usage levels during those peak hours. Now, the good news is it does appear that after that week of March 23rd, usage has settled in a bit and plateaued in terms of continued growth. So the subsequent weeks, we actually have seen be at or below those levels that we saw across the board on the week of March 23rd. Now we'll shift gears to what's happening actually on the upstream side, which is for an MSO, an area that they must really pay attention to because they have much less capacity availability on the upstream side of their network than they do on the downstream side. So what we've seen here, and again, largely because of video calling, a lot more upstream usage than we've ever observed before. And when we say a lot, we're talking 80 to 100% higher usage on the upstream side. And as you can see by the chart here, what's really interesting about this is the curve, not to steal this phrase, but the curve is really flattening. There's no specific peak. If you look back in January and the first even couple weeks of March, you see a very consistent curve that we saw on the downstream side, but you see that clear peak in the 9, 10, 11 p.m. hours, where now you're seeing the peak usage has grown, but usage on the upstream during the 9 to 5 has grown tremendously to the point now where from really 10 a.m. through the end of the day, that's the new peak curve on the upstream side. So this, again, is an area that operators really need to pay particular attention to as they perform their network planning and forecasting of the kind of data that they're going to need to be able to support on the upstream side of their network. Now, again, I mentioned up front, we had made some predictions in the fourth quarter OVBI that we did. And what we're seeing is we've come pretty close to reaching a lot of those predictions. You see a few of them here where we anticipated there'd be about 1.4% of subscribers exceeding 2 terabytes of usage for the year, which would have been an 80% increase over 2019. We anticipated 12% of subscribers exceeding 1 terabyte. We assumed that 50% by the end of this year of subscribers would be using over 250 terabytes. And we assumed the average usage at the end of 2020 would come in about 425 gigabytes per household. So as we mentioned, in the beginning here, much of this growth has already occurred here in the first quarter. And if we look specifically at some of those categories, you see we have 1% of subscribers over 1.4 terabytes. We have 10% of subscribers over 1 terabyte. We predicted 12, and we're almost at that 50% level with subscribers over 250 gigabytes. And if we look at average usage per household in the first quarter, we were at a rounded number of 403 gigabytes, and we predicted at the end of 2020 to be at 425. So what we're really seeing is essentially 1 year of growth in 1 quarter as a result of the COVID-19 impacts. In fact, what we've seen most recently at the beginning of the second quarter here, looking at the full month of April, we actually exceeded 440 gigabytes of usage. So we're already now 15 gigabytes above what we predicted. And that prediction was based on, again, 10 years of history and all the historic data, looking at growth rates, et cetera. But obviously that all goes out the window now that we're dealing with quote unquote the new normal. So a few conclusions. During the first quarter, obviously the pandemic has had tremendous impacts on usage patterns. We do not expect usage to fall back to the levels that we saw even back in January, which are typically a pretty high month each year. We, in fact, expect that usage will remain high, certainly throughout the summer. And then by all indications, more and more people will be working from home moving forward permanently. And so we don't expect usage to really curtail that much from current levels. So one thing that's clear is there's just a huge dependency on broadband. We're seeing high subscriber growth amongst the operators that we work with, more and more upgrades to higher speeds as subscribers need those faster speeds for their new behavior. So home networks, have become very, very reliant on broadband, and we do not expect that trend to slow down. So as discussed, we put forth a bunch of predictions in our last OVBI report. Many of those have already been met or close to being met. We do not expect usage to return to pre-pandemic levels, and we're certainly going to continue to monitor this usage and see what happens here in the second quarter, and we'll very likely come out with a new set of predictions in our next OVBI report. One of the things that's become clear as we've worked with our operator customers to help them through this period is that they really need to understand the implications of this shifting behavior. It's not just a matter of looking at usage curves on the network, but operators are being very smart, looking at the trends and the changes to content consumption behavior of their subscribers, the impacts of mitigation efforts, things they can do to ensure that they provide the best quality of service for their customers as possible. And so they're leveraging this kind of data every single day to not just build the network to support what's happening, but build it for the future as well. And the only way to do that is really to have access to this kind of data for your own network. And that's a critical solution set that we bring to our customers. So to get into a little bit more detail on what it is that we offer, why are we actually here talking about this stuff? Why do we have any credibility to talk about all these numbers? It's because we provide solutions directly focused on the broadband marketplace. We help our customers optimize their networks. We help them drive revenue. A few of our solution suites here include network management, being able to help operators understand what's going on inside their network, understand where that peak curve is, understand which subscribers might be causing those peak levels, providing solutions that allow them to diagnose issues remotely and solve those issues for subscribers rather than rolling trucks and sending field techs into subscribers' homes. Subscribers don't want that these days, nor do the operators. So anything that can be done to remotely diagnose issues is critical, and we have a solution suite that does just that. We also provide a lot of revenue generation services for our customers. You saw a lot today about usage behavior per subscriber, et cetera. We do this at a very, very granular level for our operator customers so that we can do things like identify upgrade candidates. We see many, many subscribers that need faster bandwidth speeds. Over time, their needs change, their bandwidth needs change. So helping to identify those so that operators can be proactive with those subscribers can ultimately provide a better quality of service and a faster speed for operators that need it. So lots of revenue can be generated by having access to the data that we provide in our solutions. We provide things like prepay, allowing operators to go after different ends of the market. Could be credit risk customers. It could be bad debt subscribers that need service, and prepay is a great option for those subscribers. And then also subscribers need to be educated. They need to be engaged, whether it's texting them when they reach certain usage thresholds, sending them emails, giving them a usage meter so they can see how much data they're consuming each month. We provide a whole suite of solutions around that as well. So I want to make sure everybody here on this call understands that we are a solution provider, that through the use of these solutions, we're collecting millions and billions of data sets every single day. And it's all of that data collected through our solutions that's compiled to be able to share with you the kind of metrics that we do within the OVBI. Now, these solutions really are useful across the organization. Different functional groups have different specific needs, and our solutions are designed so that across a broadband operator's environment, we've got solutions that can help every area of the business, from engineering to marketing to finance to senior management with KPIs and dashboards. If anybody's interested in learning more about our solutions, please contact us at sales@openvault.com.
Thank you, Mark. I understand you'll be sticking around for some questions and answers. Before that, I just want to remind those on the call, if they haven't already, to download the Q120 report if you haven't, and and take a look at it and contact us to set up a call to discuss how we can provide those actionable insights that Mark just talked about for your network with our suite of tools. Mark, a couple questions did come in. They're aimed at you, so I'm going to go ahead and read a few of these off. Okay. The first question is, you mentioned cord cutting earlier. Do you expect cord cutting events to continue and to have an impact on providers?
Yeah, there's no doubt that cord cutting is an issue now, and in fact, there's been many stories that have been done recently about how cord cutting is accelerating. We've done a lot of analysis around usage behavior of cord cutters, the data consumption levels of cord cutters versus the traditional double, triple play subscribers that still have, again, the more traditional video services. And we see tremendous usage deltas between those types of subscribers. In fact, cord cutters tend to use nearly twice as much data and consume twice as much data as the traditional video and bundled subscribers do. So cord cutting will continue, whether it's because of economic reasons, with so many economic issues in the world right now. Subscribers only have so much to spend on entertainment, on communications, on media, on broadband and video, et cetera. And, they've got to choose, many of them, they've got to choose. And broadband is certainly the choice over traditional video at this point, because of all the options really that are now available through broadband and just the need for broadband in general. So we do not expect cord cutting to slow down. If anything, it will, I think, continue to accelerate like we've seen here the past few weeks and months. And operators need to be prepared for that because it is going to have an impact. We've seen growth as a result of the pandemic, but some of that growth is coming as a result of cord cutting as well, and that's not going to slow down.
Thank you. Another question came in. Should providers consider usage-based billing or usage caps when considering this pandemic has shown that providers are able to manage their networks?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've gotten that question a lot. First of all, I think it's unfair to say usage caps. Operators very rarely truly cap usage. Certainly there are usage allowances and usage quotas on a per speed tier basis that many of our that we see many operators offering out there, and those have been, as I mentioned up front, relaxed during this time period. Are operators going to revert to those? That time will tell if they do. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about usage-based billing, though, and the deployment of usage-based billing and the idea that it's hurting subscribers, et cetera. I can tell you from having many customers that have deployed usage-based billing and many that haven't, subscribers are happier in those operators that have deployed usage-based billing. Net promoter scores are higher for operators that have deployed usage-based billing. And it's really inaccurate to think otherwise. And part of that reason is that one of the trends that we see that operators that have deployed usage-based billing and usage quotas, the big trend is that subscribers end up right-sizing themselves. They see the usage quota. They don't want to deal with the usage limit. Even though 99% of subscribers are never impacted by it, they don't like the idea of it. So they would rather upgrade to a faster speed. In many cases, they needed to upgrade anyways. Again, as behavior has changed, subscribers need to really take a look at the bandwidth they have to see if they need more. So one of the big reasons that we hear from operators that have deployed usage-based billing is that their customers self-select to upgrade, which typically comes with a higher quota. And as a result, they finally have the bandwidth that they actually need, resulting in less phone calls into customer care about slow internet speeds, fewer trucks being rolled and field techs being sent out to deal with a problem, which is really just the size of the pipe going into the house. So as a result of less phone calls, less truck rolls, et cetera, subscribers end up being happier. They've got the bandwidth that they need. So it's really I think a misnomer when people think that usage-based billing is really hurting subscribers. Very few subscribers actually get impacted by those overage fees. In fact, well before overage fees are typically applied, these subscribers have upgraded to get higher quotas and are happier customers.
Thank you. Another question is, we saw that your predictions have already been hit. What does your crystal ball say about the rest of 2020?
Well, as I said, I mean, we don't think that usage will go back to pre-pandemic levels. I mean, usage has been on the rise 25-30% a year since we've been in business. So it's not going to, we're going to continue to see growth. I think that we're going to have to see how it plays out with behavior and how long this thing lasts, number one, but also what's the long-term effect of people working from home, education and online classes, et cetera. Is that going to, continue? And then, one thing that never slows down is the advent of new bandwidth intensive devices, 4K TVs, 8K TVs, et cetera. That's continuing to help drive up usage, because as higher quality video is consumed, that results in more and more consumption. So we do expect usage to continue to grow. We certainly saw that spike that we talked about at the end of March. So I think things have clearly settled down since then. In fact, in our latest week that we looked at here in May, the usage has actually come down even further since that spike that we saw. So, but again, it's still way above the pre-pandemic levels, and we expect that to continue.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mark. That takes us up on our time. And thanks to all of you who attended. Please stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks all.